Uh, I'm here, I guess, to share just a couple of my reflections, having had the chance to participate in this conference. And I'm thinking back as I was putting some thoughts together to the first conference, Self-Determination Individualized Funding Conference in Seattle in 2000. And reflecting on some of the things I've heard the last couple of days. And this place that we're in. And I think it's important to have a big picture about this place that we're in without it defeating us, to Sue's and others' points. So we don't want to be defeated, but we also want to have our eyes wide open. I think we really have to understand what's going on so that we can be clear about, and very, very clear, very smart, very strategic about how we go forward. So when I think about what's going on, since the Universal Declaration, we've seen a growing recognition of rights, of inalienable rights, in all the instruments that followed the Universal Declaration, and we've been referencing the UN Convention a number of times. But there were a number in the International Covenant on Economic, Cultural, Social Rights in the 70s, civil and political rights, the various instruments to recognize the rights of persons with disabilities coming to sort of fruition, if you will, most fully with the convention. At the same time, and this has also been acknowledged throughout this conference, and especially I think we're really sensing it now, it's really in our face, how profoundly changing demographics is going to affect us all. So I really congratulate all those, the organizers and planners for this conference in bringing this collection together. And I appreciate Deb's comments about the conversation's begun, and Jim Mann's presentation on the opening morning just was profoundly moving and had a huge impact on me, and I think on all of us, about the importance of really listening really deeply across the many differences in this room, but also the things that tie us together. So at the same time that we've had this growing rights recognition, this changing demographic, which means that more and more and more of us have support needs that we're going to rely on each other and our communities for, the state has been withdrawing. And we saw presentations yesterday afternoon about the cuts directly on people with disabilities, income, benefits, supports. So what is going on, and what does it mean? You've got this growth in recognition of rights, inalienable rights, that more and more our movement is recognized in with the convention. At the same time that the state is withdrawing, but the base of the population who's going to rely on support is growing. Like, what do we do in this moment? So one of the things that we're doing in Canada is legalizing assisted suicide. That's what we're doing. And it's very interesting that in the last 20 years, the opinion polls in support of assisted suicide have grown. In support of assisted suicide, just as the state has withdrawn and the need for supports have grown and the population has aged. And I don't think that those things are disconnected. Because state withdrawal means, the big word people say it's, well, we live in neoliberal times, right? The great sort of philosophy and history of liberalism was a growth in the recognition of individual rights, but embedded in a community where you were actually seen as a citizen and could rely on the community to support you, that knew you through the stretch of your life and supported you from infancy through the end of your life. That was the great idea of liberalism, that it would balance both individual and community in ways that would take us out of those times where people didn't have their individual character, their individual possibilities couldn't be seen or realized. Neoliberal times means, great, you get to craft your own life. You get to craft your own life in your own way, and nobody's going to get in your way, the state or nobody. And that's what is being played upon in this time that we're in. So I was at an event in Toronto, and we've been very involved in this event in Toronto at a seniors center about this, and I was there, and it was myself and the director of Dying with Dignity Canada. And it was an amazing experience. All these, well, some were baby boomers and older, who, and this means no disrespect at all, but there was no call for the state to be there to provide support, to make sure people were supported. It was no, when I'm tired, I want to go, and I want to be able to ask someone to push the button and have it done. And I thought, wow, that's really something. That's not how we called upon each other. That's not how we formed our claims on the state, as I remember it, even 10 or 15 years ago. But that's how we understand it now. So in this neoliberal time, we have our rights. Our rights are to autonomy and to make my choice, and when I'm done, I don't want to be in that situation that I see more and more, where people have no support in their life. They're left completely isolated and alone. They don't have community. Why would I want to go on living? Make sure I have the opportunity to exit when I want, on my own terms. Now, Dying with Dignity folks would tell us that that's the height of autonomy. What's happened is that autonomy has become the only principle, the guiding principle. So I think we need to really open our eyes to this, because that's the consequence of state withdrawal. Recognition of the right to autonomy is that you're left on your own. You can't rely on your community for support, because the threads of it are going to be so worn bare as the state withdraws that you'll have nothing to rely on. So it makes perfect sense. But we forced people into an impossible choice. So what do we then do in these times? And I think things have changed. I think that this is upon us in the last 15 years since we began our gatherings in Seattle in 2000, where there was a real sense that in order to enable people with disabilities to take real power over their lives, individualized funding and shifting the block funding of service providers, et cetera, to individuals so they could claim their lives in their own ways. Like, that's how we understood our call. I think this claiming full citizenship, I've really heard through a number of sessions this last few days that is actually how we need, that claiming it this way, claiming full citizenship, is our call, and it actually brings us together. So we're not building a movement for individualized funding. We're building a much bigger movement to claim our full citizenship in light of the state pulling back, in light of the growing number of us that rely on each other. We've always relied on each other, but I think we've been living under some myth that, you make it on your own, and that's cognitively and otherwise, and that's what makes you a full person. So I think stepping back into the language that we started with this conference, I think that's been confirmed, at least in the conversations I've been a part of, that what we're about is a movement for building full citizenship, and that can include all of us. And the need to do that, I think all the speakers have emphasized, and certainly opening this conversation with older persons in our community, persons with a broad range of neurological conditions, many of whom are now have been claiming and went to court to claim the right to assisted suicide. I think we have to change the language and change our claims so that people feel they actually have the possibilities of a good life in the community. So we've got to claim full citizenship. We've got to grow the movement by listening really deeply. And the other sort of third thing that has been really very clear for me is to remember, and this message has come for me throughout the last couple of days, is that all change is local. ultimately. All change is local. There was a great line that came out, I think it was yesterday. A system is not going to see you as a citizen. A citizen is going to see you as a citizen. Systems don't cause citizenship. They provide some conditions for it, but ultimately, and this goes back to a theme from the very beginning, it's how we see each other that matters, and to challenge the exclusionary ways in which so many have, the exclusionary ways in which all of us in one way or another have been taught to see others. So if citizenship is fundamentally about how we see one another, all change is local. And that theme has come through time and again, that ultimately where this matters is at local levels. So creating the conditions, whether it's the early adopters for individualized funding, or it's creating support networks in some new ways, if it's transforming what local agencies are doing on the ground. A great presentation on the first day, that great graph showing in the US, the 50 states, the percentage in residential supports, state by state, that where 3 or fewer, or maybe it was fewer than 3, people were supported in arrangements. The percentage of people that were supported in arrangements of less than 3 people. In Mississippi, it was like 3 or 4%. And then this bar graph goes up to Vermont, where 95% of people are supported in arrangements less than 3 people. And you go, like, how did that happen? One of the things we've learned through the policy, which have been some brilliant policy presentations from Australia and the UK and Canada about the attempts to do grand systemic change, is that these great ideas that become bureaucratized and you lose the mobilizing leadership and they move on and there isn't organizational memory and you actually don't get the local level change that you were after. So I think that what I take away very strongly is that all change is local. And something happened in Vermont that hasn't yet happened in Mississippi. And it's not just, I can't imagine that it's just because policy was driven from the top in Vermont and not in Mississippi. At local levels in Vermont, people decided to do things differently. And that one of Michael Kendrick's comments or notes in his presentation that I appreciated so much is around gratitude. Like, let's remember to have gratitude for those who are thinking differently, trying things differently, learning to see differently. So all this macro analysis stuff is great, but let's have gratitude for those changes on the ground that people are making in their lives and in their communities, because there's so much that can be built on that. If we have gratitude for it, we're going to care about it, and we're going to make sure it lasts. And that's how change is going to take place. And policy is going to have to back that up. But that's a really dramatic change when you look at that. And I hope that we can find ways of continuing to have this conversation going forward. I really appreciate everyone. I know it takes, and we've had many international guests, and I want to say colleagues and friends from different parts of the world. I wish I could have spent more time with you, and I haven't been able to. I look forward to other times. So this is a great network of people. Good luck and bon chance, and till next time.